Alright guys, I'm back again with part 2 of the Japan trip. As you can see here, we went to some really cool stores, found some second-hand performance parts. We went to the best place in Japan to see any sort of Land Cruiser you want to see. And then we went to a museum and a couple of other spots. Can't wait to show you guys, let's get into it. Okay, so the first place here is probably familiar to a lot of you guys. We went to a store called Up Garage. They're essentially a reseller of parts when cars get wrecked. We found some really cool stuff, so this next couple of minutes I'm just going to show you some of the more exciting things that we found and a few videos of the sorts of things that you can buy. The best thing about Up Garage is they now have a website called Karuba. I'm going to put a link in the description. If you click on that, you can pretty much search every single Up Garage in Japan, and they sell their parts online, ship anywhere in the world. So definitely worth a look if you have something JDM or are looking for JDM parts. And to be honest, the stuff we looked at, I reckon the prices were very reasonable. So Up Garage isn't as exciting as it used to be. I went probably 7 years ago, and there was a lot more of your typical Skyline Evo WRX stuff, but there was still some really cool things to be had here. Also, for anyone who's wondering what the cost sort of translates to, very roughly, if you just take 2 zeros off the end of these prices and then add about 10%, that'll tell you what it is in Australian dollars at this time currently. I think the coolest thing about this place is you never know what you're going to get, and they have such a great mix. So you can see they've got heaps of suspension parts, and it suits a pretty wide range of makes and models. And they've got all the cool brands. They've got Teen, HKS, they've got some stock bits and pieces. And moving on from the suspension area, and then we get into exhaust. So again, they've got lots of stock parts, stock full exhaust for different makes and models. And then lots of aftermarket. Some of it's pretty beat up, I wouldn't touch it, but you know, there's full stainless steel systems in here. I found some bits and pieces for a chaser, but mine already has an exhaust, so I didn't bother. And cost-wise, I think it's quite good. The real cheap and nasty starts at roughly $100 Australian and goes up to about $700 or $800, which is pretty good for a full stainless system.
Alright guys, we're about an hour out of Tokyo. We've gone to a spot that has been probably top of my bucket list, something for the Land Cruiser guys on my channel. So there's a company here called Flexstream that do all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff to different vehicles.
So primarily, as you can see, they work on Land Cruisers. They do a few other bits and pieces, and I think what really made these guys famous, if you'd call it that, is they made retro style fronts for newer model cars. So the Prado that just went past your screen has a 60 series front on it. They had a real lot of 80s that had 60 series style fronts on them as well, but they had some awesome cars here. A few mid-wheelbase, a couple that had been brought in from Australia to Japan, and these guys were just so passionate about their Toyotas. I really loved it.
So they've got, looks like a mid-wheelbase 70, and then you get things like this, right? Looks like a 60, but you can probably see there the lines all go completely wrong. Land Cruiser heaven. Wow. What an epic collection that is. Get up in there and have a look. She's a bit tight in here, but oh Jesus, look at that. Every colour combination you can imagine, they're all just so bloody clean. So that's that first row, and then you've got another whole row. This is actually pretty much my dream spec. It's an FT two-tone, all the comfy stuff on it. Love that late model. They got leather seat covers inside, but beautiful. Keep going. 80s everywhere. This one's got a pretty big lift on it. Another pearl white. The hell is that? That's a Prado. The 60 front on it. Pretty interesting coloured 80s there. The 60 series front at 80s. A couple of 70s. Prados with round eye swaps. Very unique cars. Land Cruiser heaven. And unfortunately I don't have 105s here, but there's things like that 100. It's pretty cool.
So after that we quickly ducked next door to look at the Hiaces. Not nearly as interesting. Look, I can't say I'm a fan of the 60 series style fronts on the newer cars, but I'd be keen to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments what you thought of that. So once we were done there, we went back to the hotel, had dinner, spotted this beauty out the front. This is sort of goals for me, to be honest. I know they're not everyone's cup of tea, but I just reckon they're so cool. So it was great seeing that in the wild. And then we went to the Toyota Museum. So this was a way more interesting collection than what I expected. Not as many Toyotas as we thought, but some really cool stuff from the very start of cars up until today. So I've just put a few of my favourite cars that I saw into this here. So enjoy, have a look at what we looked at. I found this area of the museum a lot more interesting than I probably would have a few years ago. I just find it so fascinating so early on to see so many different ideas of what people thought cars should be. And now, you know, everything sort of fits in a box or a particular style. So this was, yeah, it was cool. This part of the museum was where the nostalgia hit for me. So things like this Sora, a guy I went to high school with had one. I used to have an A86 like this one pictured here. So it was super cool just to see cars that I grew up looking at and then have eventually owned. And seeing them in showroom condition like this is what they would have looked like from brand new. And of course, it was a Land Cruiser that grabbed my attention the most. The 200 series is such an interesting car to me. It's such a change from the 80/105 style, but there's something about them that I'd still love to have one. What do you guys think? Do you think they're a legitimate four-wheel drive, or do you think it's a waste of time? You should stick to your older 80 or 105. And this brought us to the end of our trip. This is my good friend Kento. I helped him import this 105 from Australia into Japan. So he offered to take us to Daikoku, PA, which was a really cool spot. It's the car park where people meet up. So we went there. And again, I've just taken a picture of a handful of the cars that really stood out to me. This place was awesome because there was people of all ages and they were really passionate about their cars. It was nice to see the car culture still so strong in Japan, because a lot of those hero cars have disappeared off the roads over here. And that's it for the Japan trip. So I'm right back into it already with the Land Cruiser and the other bits and pieces. So stay tuned and we'll have some really fun stuff coming up in the lead up to summer and Christmas.